Tadekam smaramas tadekam bhajamaha Tadekam jagat sakshirupam namamaha Sadekam nidhanam niralambamisham Bhavambodhipotam sharanyam rajamaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. On that alone do we meditate, that alone do we worship, to that alone, the witness of the universe, do we bow, to that one who is our sole eternal support, the self-existent Lord, the raft to safety across the ocean of this world, do we come for refuge. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good morning. Wonderful to be here. There's still a few seats in the front row. Those are always the last to go. Just like in the movie theater. Our topic today is Vedanta and the near-death experience. Near-death experience, or sometimes referred to as NDEs, they're now something that's becoming widely known, something that's in the news, on the radio and TV. In brief, it's a fascinating phenomenon. People who have died on operating tables or drowning in swimming pools or in car accidents report, and then are revived, report sometimes remarkable experiences of being conscious, having conscious experiences during the time of their death, of being outside of their bodies, even of meeting deceased relatives, and sometimes of having transcendent, profound, transformative spiritual experiences during the time that they were dead. So today I want to examine this phenomenon of the near-death experience, which is being widely reported now and studied, and how do these reports intersect with the teachings of Vedanta. First we'll look at are they true or are they just hallucinations? And secondly, do these descriptions tally with the teachings and principles of Vedanta? And I feel that they do resoundingly tally with Vedantic ideas and corroborate them, so validate them. So we'll start with a little history of the near-death experience. History means now it's becoming widely known, but it's a fairly recent. It was in 1975 that Dr. Raymond Moody wrote the book Life After Life, in which he coins the term near-death experience, and in which he interviewed a number of people who had had such experiences. Before that, they were almost unknown, except to those people who actually had them, of course. And they were and have been all along a subject of controversy. Are they real? Or just imagination, just a dream, just a hallucination? Science and medicine generally dismisses these reports, or has up till now been dismissing reports, such reports of conscious experiences during the time of death, as hallucinations, conjured up by an oxygen-starved brain. So this, of course, is coming from the materialist position that consciousness is just a byproduct of matter, a byproduct of neurons firing in the brain, a byproduct of the chemistry going on in this amazing organ located between our ears. This position that consciousness is produced by matter is an axiom, you can say, in the tradition, in the scientific worldview. Unquestioned truth. That's the fact. Consciousness is produced by matter. So when people report having such experiences, they can't accept them and they dismiss them. And up till now, it has been relatively easy to dismiss them. The scientists have the authority of their tradition. That all scientists agree that, neuroscientists especially, they will all agree that consciousness is produced by neurons. And there's a few stories. These are anecdotal evidence. You can't really accept anecdotal evidence scientifically. But now not dozens of reports, not hundreds of reports, thousands of reports are being collected and catalogued and tabulated, and now we're getting no longer anecdotal evidence, but statistical evidence of near-death experiences. So there's a lot of books coming out, dozens of books, some written by prominent medical doctors. So it's becoming impossible to dismiss the phenomenon of the near-death experience with a wave of the hand, as has been done up till now. And it's a field in which we find a wonderful intersection forming between religion and science. That which was always the purview of religion, always the area of study of religion, what happens after death, is now being studied by scientists. In addition, some scientists are beginning to question this long-held materialist view that consciousness is just a byproduct of brain function. Now, we can understand this materialist position, how it arose in opposition to religion. As Swami Vivekananda put it, modern science and its sledgehammer blows are pulverizing the porcelain foundations of all dualistic religions everywhere. For instance, the old faith was that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh day. Well, evolution and paleontology and these studies have smashed that myth to smithereens. Biology, neurology study of the brain, clearly we see that the connection between the brain and our thinking processes is undeniable. Different parts of the brain have been identified with different functions like memory, vision, movement, language, music, decision-making. Different parts of the brain are active when these things are happening. And we can easily verify for ourselves the connection between the brain and the mind. Drink a strong cup of coffee, you get one result. Drink a glass of scotch, you get quite a different result, right? And then we have the study of brain injuries, which is also a fascinating area of study. People who have injuries which leave them functional but handicapped in certain strange ways. Like, for instance, someone who can no longer form new memories. All the old memories are intact, but new memories are not formed. So the person might meet a good friend after every day for 10 years, and every day says, "It's so good to see you, I haven't seen you since 1980. And in 1990, say, "It's great to see you, I haven't seen you since 1980. And in 2000, same thing. So we see how who we take ourselves to be, our personality, clearly is and can affected and can be profoundly altered by the condition of the brain, be it through chemicals or disease or accident. So it seems that perhaps the brain is enough to explain our mind, our personality, our memories, all of that. In this way, religion has been smashed by science. The religion which says, no, we are souls, we are not bodies, we are conscious beings not dependent on our bodies. The evidence seems to suggest that that's not true. Why bring God in? Physics, chemistry, and biology is enough to explain everything. This is the materialist view. Now, the reports of near-death experiences are now shattering this myth of materialism. For people who have died come back to report conscious experiences without the support of a brain or a body. And though met with great skepticism at first, as I said, that's now changing. And it's interesting that a lot of this research is coming via a new field of medicine, fairly new field, called resuscitation medicine, the science of resuscitating people who have died, whose hearts have stopped. It's a relatively new field in that CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, was only developed in the 1960s, or was started being used and taught widely in the 1960s. And there's a lot of progress in the field with drugs and instruments, and it is now possible to resuscitate people who may have died minutes or even hours earlier, especially if the body is cold. Say people who fall through ice and die underwater in freezing water can be resuscitated hours afterwards. As an aside, this is why now in major hospitals, people who suffer cardiac arrest, heart attacks, their bodies are also chilled immediately. That increases the likelihood of having a successful resuscitation. So death, which was always a one-way street. What happens when we cross that line has been a subject of speculation for thousands of years. Now is becoming a two-way street, as people are returning from that experience and giving us these reports. How amazing. People reporting that after dying, they did not become less conscious, but more conscious. That they could know what had transpired around them while their bodies, at least, were dead. That they could have some transcendental experience, some meeting of deceased relatives, even going to some kind of heavenly realm, or meeting God. So, the history of the near-death experience and its coming into wider circulation is also tied in very closely with this skepticism, and the many people having these experiences tell their doctors, and their doctors just say, "Oh, you had a dream," or "No, it couldn't be. You had a hallucination. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it." Which is one reason why many people don't tell people about their experiences. After meeting such incredulity once or twice, they stop, they keep quiet. But this wall of silence, we can think of it as a wall of silence, began to crack with Moody's book, Life After Life, which incidentally became an international bestseller, 13 million copies sold, translated into a dozen languages. And in this book, he interviews hundreds of people who had near-death experiences, and he found that they have a number of common factors. So he started to tabulate these. Though each experience is unique, still there are factors that we find across all of them. And now, as I mentioned, it's becoming a flood of reports. A kind of critical mass has been reached, and now we find, even in mainstream television, regular reports about near-death experiences. And one of these scientists studying this is a doctor named Jeffrey Long, who is a radiation oncologist in Louisiana. We know another Jeffrey Long, a friend of ours, who's a professor of religion. This is a different Jeffrey Long. And he is studying these near-death experience reports, using statistical analysis with in-depth questionnaires and tabulating the results and coming to wonderful conclusions. He has identified 12 main categories or common elements of near-death experiences. And so let me just read these out first, and then we'll look at some of them more deeply. We can say, what typically happens in a near-death experience? These 12 common elements. The amazing thing is, these occur across cultures, across religions, and across ages, from the very old and also the very young. Some people remember having near-death experiences as infants, before they could even talk, and yet they remember them. So, a person dies, or nearly dies, from cardiac arrest, drug allergy, disease, drowning, car accident, stabbing, so many ways to die. So many ways to die. And then they revive. And what are these common elements? First, an out-of-body experience. This is very common, OBE. They see their own body from outside of it, from above, perhaps. They see, and they see things which can be corroborated later. This is the first. 2, they experience a heightened senses, increased clarity of vision, intense colors, hearing at a distance, even feeling or sensing telepathically what people are thinking, the emotions of those who might be around them. 3, intense and generally very positive emotions or feelings, infinite peace, unconditional love, ecstatic joy. 4, passing into or through some kind of tunnel. This is one of the stereotypical near-death experience involves the tunnel and the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's true, many do experience this, but it's not not that all experience it. This is one of the elements of near-death experiences that are common in many. 5, encountering a mystical or brilliant light, which is often described as of the very nature of unconditional love, infinite love. 6, encountering other beings, either mystical beings, sometimes described as guides, sometimes deceased relatives or deceased friends, oftentimes relatives whom they did not know that they had or whom they had never met. 7, a sense of altered time and space. Time stops. 8, a life review. The old saying, my life flashed before my eyes. Many people report this experience of having a life, the whole life, all the actions of the whole life come before them as if in a flash, and yet every action is reviewed. 9, encountering or visiting unworldly or heavenly realms. 10, encountering or learning special knowledge like the nature of God, the purpose of life, past incarnations. We find a lot of support for our idea of reincarnation in reports of near-death experiences. And remaining work to be done on earth. Those who come back, they have some sense of certain things they need to accomplish in the remaining life. 11, encountering a boundary or a barrier or point of no return, realizing that if I pass beyond this barrier, I won't be able to come back. And 12, a return to the body. That's the one that's unique to, that's common to all of them, because otherwise they wouldn't be here to tell us about it. A return to the body, in some cases voluntary, in some cases, remarkably, involuntary. They don't want to come back. They experience so much love and so much peace, they have finally come home, and they have no desire to come back, but they're forced to come back. So, as I said, near-death experiences generally involve at least one, but several or many of these elements. So let's look a little more closely at the first one, the out-of-body experience, the OBE. Vedanta and other traditions, but especially Vedanta, emphasizes this teaching: we are not our bodies. We inhabit the body, but we are not the body. However, few of us know it by experience. Rather, we act exactly in the opposite way. We're constantly identifying ourselves with our bodies. I'm cold. I'm sick. Are you sick? If you are not your body, is it you who is sick? No, it's the body which is sick. It's the body which is cold. And yet we say, I'm sick. I'm cold. I'm 50 years old now. Vedanta says you have no age. But body is 50 years old. But we say, I am 50 years old. We are identified with our bodies. In the out-of-body experience, a person typically finds him or herself floating up above the body and seeing it from above, perhaps seeing doctors or the emergency medical workers working on the body. Sometimes they don't even recognize it first. Suddenly it dawns on me, oh, that's my body. Here's an example. I'll read an example. A boy was electrocuted in his garage. As I was being electrocuted, I left my body and floated above the scene. I was surrounded by a warm, diffuse light, but could see everything clearly. I could see my body shaking and convulsing with the electrical current. My eyes were open, my mouth was open, but I couldn't speak. I seemed to know that I was going to die unless something changed. I don't remember being scared or frightened at all, very matter-of-factly. While floating, I went over to where my dad was working at the other end of the garage. He had his back to my body and wasn't aware of what was going on. I went over to him, and then he looked up from his work on the floor, turned to see my body being electrocuted. He picked up a hammer and threw it across the room and knocked the extension cord drop light out of my hand. So this is the, see how the report, he's specifically saying that his father looked over to see my body, not to see me. I'm above the scene. And he saw his father knock the cord out of the hand of his body to stop the electrical current, which was very smart. If the father had gone and touched him, he also would have been electrocuted, most likely. So he understood something about electricity. Some of the most remarkable out-of-body experiences occur in emergency rooms and operating rooms when patients die on the table. Now, cardiac arrest means the heart, which is pumping all the time, stops pumping. It's called flatlining because the electrocardiogram line goes flat. We've all seen it in hospitals, or at least on TV, that line that goes beep, beep, beep with the little wave. And if the heart stops pumping, there's no more electrical impulses, and that line goes flat. That means you're flatlining, the heart has stopped pumping. Now, what I didn't know before I started researching this is that within 10 to 20 seconds of the blood, the stopping of the circulation of blood, all the organs of the body also cease to function, including the brain. Without that fresh supply of oxygen and nutrients, the brain also stops. So there's what you call an electroencephalogram, measuring the electrical activity in the brain, also goes flat within about 20 seconds of cardiac arrest. So at this time, when the brain is not functioning, a few people report having these highly conscious experiences where they float above their bodies, see the doctors and nurses working frantically in a panic sometimes to restart the heart, and yet they feel utterly disconnected, at peace, unconcerned. They can hear everything going on in the room, see it from above, and what's especially exciting is that what they see can be corroborated afterwards. At this time, the brain is not functioning, but their reports are corroborated. One example, which I thought is it's funny somehow. A nurse, the man had a cardiac arrest, and a nurse was putting a breathing tube down the throat, and she saw him remove his dentures and put them in the drawer of that emergency cart with all the emergency equipment. Now afterwards, when he was resuscitated, they couldn't find his dentures, and he could tell them where they were. He said, well, they're in the drawer of the cart. So this kind of verifiable data gives us a lot of confidence in the truth of these reports. It's not just hallucinations when we can corroborate these things afterwards. And moreover, the sheer number of these experiences now being reported is furnishing, I would say, not only strong evidence, but it's starting to approach proof that consciousness does not depend upon brain function. When the brain is not functioning at all, people are having conscious experiences that they can remember and report later, and that can be corroborated by others who are awake and alive at that time. So we can see how wonderfully this corroborates with Vedanta teachings, that we are not the body, but we are consciousness itself. Interesting, when Sri Ramakrishna went to visit Keshav Sen, Sri Ramakrishna went to visit his good friend Keshav Sen in Calcutta. Keshav was dying, and he was very sick when Sri Ramakrishna went this last visit in 1883. And he became filled with ecstasy, Sri Ramakrishna, and he said, the body and the soul. The body was born and it will die. But for the soul there is no death. It is like the beetle nut. When the nut is ripe, it does not stick to the shell. But when it is green, it is difficult to separate it from the shell. after realizing God, one does not identify oneself anymore with the body. Then one knows that body and soul are two different things. This example of a nut is quite appropriate. A raw nut, a green nut, before it has attained full ripeness, whether it's a coconut or a betel nut, the inside and the outside are as one. But when it ripens, the shell separates from the kernel. And we can easily open the nut and get the kernel and eat it and enjoy it. But that idea of separation, as we are now, it seems that we are completely identified with our bodies. We are connected with our bodies. But actually, that's only because the nut hasn't ripened yet. When the nut ripens, we shall know that we are separate from the body. And those who have had the good fortune to have such an experience, either in meditation, in spiritual practices, or as a result of a near-death experience, they also know they are not their bodies. So this does raise a lot of interesting questions, because these out-of-body experiences we've been discussing establish beyond a doubt, that beginning at least, to establish beyond a doubt that consciousness is primary. And yet we do experience this as if we're locked in our bodies. As I said, drink a cup of coffee or drink a glass of scotch and see the difference. So what is the connection? What is the nature of this connection between this, who we really are, and our bodies? What is the relation between our minds and our brains? Our mind functions without the brain, but here we are in the body, and clearly the mind is at present circumscribed by the limits of the brain, the physical limits of the brain. So it's an exciting area of study, and an area in which, as I said, religion and science really seem to be coming together. It's the near-death experiences, I was surprised to know, are actually much more common than we know, at least those of us who haven't had them know. In every group I have spoken with about this, at least one or two people have come up to me afterwards and said, I had one. I have heard over a dozen reports of people who have had such experiences. And one thing that strikes me, hearing about them directly from people, is the conviction. The conviction of the person who had the experience that it was real, that it actually happened. It wasn't a hallucination, it wasn't a dream, it was more real than my usual experience. And that it's generally, almost always life-changing. My life was changed as a result of such an experience, people say. People generally don't, one reason we don't know that so many people have had them is that people don't like to talk about them, and there are three reasons. First of all, the experience is ineffable. It's difficult to put into words. It's difficult to do justice to the experience of infinite peace and unconditional love that people often experience. How to put that into words? Secondly, it's an intensely personal experience. It's something that people feel reluctant to share because it's just so personal. It's sacred. It's a sacred experience. And third, so often people are met with disbelief. And their friends start thinking, well, Mary's finally lost her marbles. Huh? I think there's a screw. After that accident, her screws got a little loose. It's true, this happens. This is very common, from doctors to relatives to friends. So people don't talk about them much. So what we have talked about thus far is really just a small tip of the iceberg, so to speak, of what happens in near-death experiences. Let's look a little bit more at some reports of people who have had these experiences. Once out of the body, many experience intensely heightened awareness, much more than our normal waking consciousness. And they have what they describe as 360-degree vision. They're aware, we can only see this much, but somehow freed from the physical senses, they can see or perceive in 360 degrees. Simultaneous awareness, expanding beyond the immediate surroundings. aware of different things happening at the same time, and experiences that can be described as transcendent and mystical. And the more profound these experiences, the more difficulty people have in describing them. Let me read an example from Anita Moorjani, who wrote a wonderful book called Dying to Be Me. So she's describing, she was dying of cancer, and she died in the hospital, intensive care. She described, I'll read a short passage from her book. As my emotions were being drawn away from my surroundings, I started to notice how I was continuing to expand, to fill every space, until there was no separation between me and everything else. I became everything and everyone. I was fully aware of every word of the conversation that was taking place between my family and the doctors, although it was physically some distance away, outside my room. I knew the frightened expression on my husband's face and could feel his fear. It was as though, in that instant, I became him. Simultaneously, although I hadn't known of it previously, I became aware that my brother Anup was thousands of miles away on an airplane, anxiously coming to see me. This was corroborated. Anup was on an airplane coming to see her. There I was, without my body or any of my physical traits, yet my pure essence continued to exist, and it was not a reduced element of my whole self. In fact, it felt far greater and more intense and expansive than my physical being. Magnificent, in fact. I felt eternal, as if I'd always existed and always would, without beginning or end. I was filled with the knowledge that I was simply magnificent. So once our consciousness is freed from the body, it seems to be freed also from the limits of the senses and the limits of the brain. The perception is more clear, intense, not bound by space. In this case, Anita gets a glimpse of her eternal nature. Always existed, always will exist. And she was filled with the knowledge of her own magnificence. How beautiful. This is in perfect accord with Vedanta. Who we are is not born. We are not born. We cannot die. We are glorious. We are glorious spiritual beings. Swami Vivekananda says, man stands on the glory of his own soul, the infinite, the eternal, the deathless. And he says, as this Maya veil, as this veil which obscures our knowledge of who we really are, as this Maya veil becomes thinner and thinner, the inborn natural glory of the soul comes out and becomes more manifest. So Anita experienced that glory of who she is. So it's a wonderful corroboration of Vedanta teachings and a great inspiration to us to remember we are glorious beings. We are magnificent. Thus far, the experiences we have been discussing are of consciousness freed from the confines of the body, but still tied to this realm of time and space. For instance, Anita was aware of the doctors speaking with her husband and of her brother coming on an airplane. Many people describe experiences that are no longer in this world. Some describe visiting other realms, of beautiful landscapes and gardens filled with exquisitely beautiful flowers, and meeting parents and grandparents, deceased relatives and siblings, like traditional descriptions of heaven. These are often have common elements, but different depending on the experiencer. Some visit buildings and meet sages dressed in robes, and Vedanta does not deny these kinds of experiences, does not deny these realms. In fact, the Vedantic tradition describes 7 different heavenly realms. But Vedanta always, we say these also are temporary. We don't pay too much attention to them here in the Vedanta Society because we're trying to find that which is eternal, our true self. These different heavenly realms, we accept them, but we want to go beyond. But Swami Vivekananda had one lecture topic, how to stop going to heaven. Yes, if we lead a good life, we do go to heaven. But then, again, we come here. Again, the circle goes around and around, the circle of smiles and tears, and unfortunately, it often seems like it's a lot more tears and a lot fewer smiles. So, what I want to focus a little bit on now is some of the more transcendently mystical and intensely spiritual experiences that people report having. Majority of near-death experience reports contain at least some elements of transcendence, and but some really go far beyond. I've read hundreds of these reports, and there's a wonderful website set up by Dr. Jeffrey Long, whom I mentioned before, where he's presented these experiences with the permission of those who have submitted them. And the website itself is a place for people to submit their reports through that lengthy questionnaire. So Dr. Long uses the data collected at his website in his study. And and I would encourage you, if you're interested, to check out the website. It's the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation is the name of his organization, and it's nderf.org, Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, NDERF. Anyhow, ask me later if you want to know about it. They read like scripture. Many of these experiences read like scripture. What are our scriptures actually? They're the records of the spiritual experiences of the saints and sages. Now here we have people having transcendent experiences and writing them down. So they do read like scripture oftentimes. They're often, we find a lot of corroboration of Vedantic teachings. And what's especially exciting is that these are ordinary people, like you and me. They're not the ancient sages, they're not great saints, they're not yogis, deep meditators. They're just people like you and me, but they have profound, indescribable experiences of divinity which completely transform their lives. Several things happen to experiences after they have such experiences. First, they completely lose their fear of death. The big fear which all of us have, which eats into the vitals of every person who lives, is wiped out when we have an experience of being separate from the body dying, and yet we remaining. Such people become more compassionate, more loving, more forgiving. They become more spiritually inclined, generally much more spiritually inclined, but often much less religiously inclined. The old religion with its dogmas and doctrines, those are all wiped away. Very often the dogmas and doctrines don't tally with their experience. In fact, some of the strongest deniers of near-death experience are certain dogmatic religious leaders who say, well, that doesn't fit what's written in our book, so it can't be true, it must have been a hallucination, or it's the work of the devil. Yes, people report these things in their near-death experiences. They also report how, well, I told my priest or rabbi or whoever, and they said, no, it can't be. So the experience, people go beyond the limited conceptions of religion to realize that the divine is real, is beyond all words, beyond all ideas, beyond all doctrines and dogmas. And they realize that conventional people stuck in conventional religion have really a very limited conception of the divine, very limited conception of what is God, because we're not established in God consciousness. Another interesting thing is that such people, though they have this experience, they don't become saints. They still remain, when they come back to the body, they still have those limitations of personality that they had. They still have issues they have to work through. And oftentimes it takes some years, it can take many years even, to integrate into their lives the experience they had. But, of course, their lives are changed. And I would say if they aren't made into saints, still they become more saintly, shall we say? They become more saintly. I'd like to read another example. A woman named Michelle who was shot in the neck by her boyfriend. I could see myself from above into my body. I could see myself from above, as if I was perched on a corner of the ceiling in the room, looking down at myself. I saw all kinds of police and firefighters looking over my body and stepping around me. I had no pain. I had no blame towards anyone, no ill feelings. I felt so blissful and whole, full of the most love I had ever experienced. I thought to myself, if this is dying, then it is not as bad as everyone thinks it is. Then I saw a light from above me. It was pulling me away from the room. I figured it was okay to just let this happen and to go with the flow and accept whatever was to be. The light was getting brighter, engulfing my body. A body? I had no body. It stayed back down in that damp room. I realized that I was dead physically, but mentally I was still alive. My soul was now my body, quote unquote. I looked up into the light. I could see someone beckoning me to come. He was there at the end of this lit tunnel. Then I heard a voice. It was a man's voice. He asked me if I was ready. I felt so good. It was so easy. Death, it was so easy. When Holy Mother, Sri Sarada Devi, Sri Ramakrishna's spiritual partner, was weeping, grieving so much for him after he had left the body, he came to her and said, "Why are you weeping so much? Have I gone to another place? Here I am. I've just passed from one room to another." It's so easy. He used to say, it's like a sword drawn from a sheath. Watching one of his relatives, watching his nephew die, he said it was like a sword was pulled from a sheath. The sheath is no longer necessary. We are fortunate that some people who have these experiences do have a gift with language and are able to poetically transmit at least a glimpse of their experience. Some report dissolving of the ego, after which they describe what can only be called an experience of realization or enlightenment or illumination. There's a woman named Annie after a car accident. After seeing her body, she begins to rise, accompanied by a guide. And I'll start reading here. As the extraordinary event unfolded, my escort and I ascended into the sky. Unconditional love became more concentrated. The awareness filled my inner consciousness with joy, comfort, and ecstasy. A blinding, magnetic, brilliant light focused on my forehead, drawing me closer and closer to the light that was beginning to encompass my whole being. Unconditional love intensely flowed everywhere without effort, honoring and glorifying every cell with a total awareness of physically, emotionally, and mentally being within love at last. Every cell is gently caressed in the all-abundant love, honoring and glorifying every bit of who I am. Love that flowed without any conditions or effort, omnipresent and very real. The love abundantly flowed without any restrictions, conditions, or commitments. as we ascended, the clutches of the dramas that ego entertained disappeared. Ego's continual habit of self-sabotage was non-existent at last. The veil which separated me from experiencing the reality of unconditional love was effortlessly dissolved. Here we have again a wonderful intersection with Vedantic teachings. As Swami Vivekananda puts it, the adamantine wall that shuts us in is egoism. Until we give up the world manufactured by the ego, never can we enter the kingdom of heaven. None ever did, none ever will. To give up the world is to forget the ego, to know it not at all, living in the body but not of it. This rascal ego must be obliterated. Here we see Annie had this experience. The ego dissolved. And that veil which separated her from experiencing the reality of unconditional love was effortlessly dissolved. And then the nature of the divine as love. We see Annie's experience so beautifully transmits this truth. Swami Vivekananda again, he says, the very idea of God is love. Seeing a cat loving her kittens stand and pray, God has become manifest there. Anywhere we see love, that is God. God is love. One of the principles that we emphasize in Vedanta is the harmony of religions, that religions are like so many different paths to the divine. We also find in reports of near-death experiences corroborations of this principle. Most experiencers do not name the light, the infinite divine light which they experience, as a personal God. And some specifically affirm this idea of a harmony of religions. For instance, there was a woman from Mexico who had an acute asthma attack and died, and she had a vision of Jesus who came to her, and Jesus looked just like he did on the poster in her Sunday school, just like that. And then she had the thought, while seeing Jesus, she had the thought, if I had been a Buddhist, perhaps he would look like Buddha. And she was told, that is right. God appears in a familiar form. There's another woman raised in the a particular we can say a very narrow tradition of strict interpretation of scripture and teachings of God that made her fearful. She was actually terrified to die because she was afraid of God and afraid of being judged and afraid of going to the other place when she died. Her experience completely transformed her. Let me read a little from her experience. As my mind cleared, scoured of the remnants of mortal past associations, I was finally able to open my being fully to spirit, and my vision cleared. With the eyes of my soul body, I looked to see what held me in such love, and I beheld a radiant spirit being, so magnificent and full of love that I knew I would never again feel the sense of loss. I have no way of explaining how, but I knew the Spirit was Christ. Others might have called him Buddha, or Yahweh, or Great Spirit in the sky, but the naming did not matter. Only the recognition of absolute love and truth was important. Safe in the gentle yet powerful embrace of his love, I rested, secure that everything was okay, exactly as it was supposed to be. How wonderful. She writes that before this experience, the wrathful, vengeful God, as taught by my religion, instilled in me a deep fear of God, death, and the afterlife. And here she meets whom she can only call as Christ, and that fear has been obliterated forever, and she feels utterly fulfilled. And yet at the same time she knows that Christ is just a name. Others might have called him Buddha or Yahweh or Great Spirit. It doesn't matter. This is Sri Ramakrishna's parable, experienced directly. Sri Ramakrishna's parable of the pond where people go to get water, and the Hindus go to one side of the pond and they call it Pani, and the Muslims go to another side and they call it Jol, or is it the other way around? And the Christians go to a third place and they call it Aqua. They call it all by these different names. Are they getting different stuff? It's all the same stuff. It doesn't matter what you call it, whether you call it aqua or water or pani or jal, it's the same substance. So likewise, that reality, that divine reality, is one, called by so many names. I'd like to read just a little more of Linda's experience, because it goes on to incredible experiences. Ascending ever farther, I lifted my eyes to see a great light in the vast distance. With Christ as my guide, I rapidly approached the light. Ecstasy filled my soul as I looked at the radiance, many-fold brighter than the sun. The light was everywhere and everything, the brightest I had ever seen, and dazzling beyond description. Brilliant enough to blind or burn, yet I was not harmed. The light moved over and through me, washing every hidden place of my heart, removing all hurt and fear, transforming my very being into a song of joy. I had thought the love I felt from Christ was complete, yet the light towards which we were soaring was the fulfillment of my search, the loving source of all that exists, the God of truth and unconditional love, the origin of creation. I was home, and I wanted nothing more than to remain in the light of God. Christ had delivered me into the light, and I stood in the presence of God. I was filled with complete knowing. The light was love, and love was God. There was no limit to the outpouring as I came to the rapturous awareness of the infinite nature of God's love. There was no place that God did not exist, and I was within God. I am an inseparable part of the light. The truth of who I am, indeed, who we all are, is perfect love as a creation of God. All of God's creation is one creation, and I am one with creation. God and I are one. So she also has the experience of our Vedantic understanding. We are one with God. God and I are one. Finally, it all made sense, she says. Finally, it all made sense. God could only love me because God is only love, nothing other than love. The only reality is God. There cannot be another, and God is love. What a realization. What a vision. She not only experienced the light, but merged with it and had a profound realization of her unity with the divine. We're coming up towards the end of the hour. I feel like I could go on reading these for another hour. They're gripping. And I think one reason they're gripping is because they're people, ordinary people like you and me, who have had this experience recently. It's not written in some ancient book of some sages 1,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago, but people here and now who are having these experiences. And it's a wonderful corroboration of our Vedanta teachings. Let me just impose on you for a few minutes. We'll just go a few minutes over. I want to touch on the life review, because there's a wonderful description here of the life review, which is common to many near-death experiences, which often seems to take place instantaneously. And as a real expression of our understanding of karma, seeing how every action has its effects and how our actions ripple out into the world and have effects far beyond what we realize, far beyond what we see. Someone named Cami was crushed under a car. This is her life review, a partial description of her near-death experience, of course, where she had the life review. Here I could see the whole picture, how every thought and motivation of the previous life passage snaked tendrils of manifestation into the world, and how each tendril rolled out to affect other people and all of life. I felt everything, every little kindness, every subtle dig, each moment of carelessness, the wasted potentials, the comfort passed on to others, the secret joys, impatience, self-pity, a genuine smile to a lonely person at the right moment, ripples from a tossed pebble. I experienced how everyone experienced my actions and intentions, and how everyone they affected felt, and so on, down the chain of action and reaction, flowing even into nature itself. More importantly, I could see how things could have been if enacted with pure love. So we see how even the things we say sometimes is a kind of just little digs, little insults, little nasty things we say sometimes. She experienced all of those. And she felt how the people on the receiving end felt. And how those people then, with that bad feeling, went and affected somebody else. Incredible to see so she describes it as, it was as if the web of this incarnation was a soft silk, and we were holding it up to examine thread by thread, seeing how it draped in all directions from each point we lifted, seeing where the tensions ran through other layers and other lifetimes. So it's a wonderful glimpse into the workings of karma and the understanding of karma. We generally in Vedanta, we accept the law of karma. And here we see how she has experienced, and many experiencers describe this experiencing our actions from the point of view of those whom we affected. So when we had that big fight with our friend and our friendship broke apart, and we experienced the fight from our friend's standpoint. So I think we better start wrapping it up. The final point in all these experiences, of course, is a return to the body. Oftentimes, those who choose to return willingly are generally pulled by children or spouses, or parents perhaps. They feel their parent or their children need them, and though they really would like to stay in this infinite light and love, they feel compelled to return, and they can see their trajectory, what would happen to their children if they didn't return, and so they feel compelled to return. At other times, against their will, they don't want to return, and yet they're pushed back into the body. So to leave when they don't want it can be very painful. So in conclusion, it's a wonderful study to study these near-death experiences, because we find so many parallels with Vedanta. It's a real corroboration and confirmation of Vedantic teachings. And Vedanta, because it's so broad, because it really emphasizes principles, basically the principle of divinity, that though we see such variety in the near-death experiences, the Vedantic principles shine through all of them. Vedanta is broad enough to embrace all these experiences. Everything, of course, is unfolding within the infinite consciousness that is the divine, that is Brahman. And it's so encouraging, because these people are ordinary people like you and me, those whose vision has been cleared for a time and have had a direct experience of the divine and been transformed. It's a great reminder of our true nature, our birthright, infinite love and bliss. But there's one important point. The message of Vedanta is that we need not die to experience this. We can experience this here and now. It's a great reassurance that we shall experience it when we die, but that's not the point. As Swami Mahayogananda used to say, Vedanta is not a religion of post-mortem emancipation. It's here and now in this life. We are called to realize the truth in this life, and that's where the guidance of the saints and sages to undertake spiritual practices comes in. That's where the teachings of sadhana, of how do we experience it, what are the practices we undertake, that's where the religion comes in. That's where the spiritual practice comes in, and that's where the practices of all the religions lead us to this goal. I make a brief footnote. Vedanta strongly is strong. We do not recommend suicide. Some people hearing about these near-death experiences, especially if they're suffering, they may think, well, let me just commit suicide and get to the bliss. There are a number of near-death experiences, quite a number, reported by people who have tried to commit suicide, and none of them have tried again. They realize as soon as they cross that, no, that was a mistake. And Vedanta, if we don't face it here, karma is inexorable. So we'll have to face the effect of a suicide, which is very hurtful to those around us, our families, those who love us. So it's not suicide, but it's attaining freedom, attaining God consciousness in this life itself is the message of Vedanta. And thank you for giving me this chance to share it with you.
Thank you.
Om Iyam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutaha Stunvanti Divyaistavai Vedai Sangapada Kramopanishadai Gayantiyam Samaga Dhyanavastita tadgatena manasa Pashyantiyam yogino Yasyantam naviduh Surasuragana Devaya tasmai namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Our salutations to him who is the truth of life and existence, and whom the sages call by various names. Our salutations to him whose glory is sung in the sacred hymns of the various scriptures of the world, but whose limitless and infinite grandeur no mortal mind can comprehend. Our salutations to him on whom the devotees meditate in the shrine of their hearts and realize his ineffable presence in their deepest contemplations. May he illumine our understanding and prompt our minds to the path of truth and righteousness. May he reveal himself unto our souls and dispel the gloom of delusion, fear, doubt, and darkness. Om, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, peace be unto all.